We're going to get into a subject here that's often interwoven into debates about choice and flexibility in schools and testing and so many other areas, and that's Common Core. I'd like to ask each of you about this. Sajan, if you could tell us maybe how that affects what you try to do at Matchbook. And Gerard, if you could follow that by speaking to the way that having been the head of a state education agency, you think that states like Georgia ought to approach it. So let's start with Sajan.
So I'll answer it at a practical level and then probably a strategic one. So the practical level is, so our kids get, one of the big things in our models, they get choice in how they learn something. So we contract with more than half a dozen to a dozen different content providers. So when a student is in math class, they're learning how to add fractions. We've curated literally 12 different ways, and they pick 3. And it could be online, it could be with the teacher, it could be on a project, it could be a hands-on project or whatever. It could be audio or video, but the student gets a choice. It puts real agency in the hands of the student, ownership over their student learning. And we do this all the way from kindergarten through 8th grade. We make sure that those content providers, their content aligns to Common Core. So what that means is that where Common Core has standards that, so I don't believe in a Common Core curriculum. This is the exact right way to teach fractions. But where the standards come into play is to ensure that the student not only can recite or regurgitate the facts around fractions, but apply those fractions in a real world problem. So we make sure that the way that the content is being delivered to the students meets that sort of bar. That's the answer on a practical level. I think on a strategic level, this isn't just for Matchbook learning. Like, I want this for my own kids. So I have 3 kids, elementary school age. They go to Fulton County Public Schools. And you know, they take the state test, and I get it at the end of the year, and I see their score, and I see their percentile ranking, and then I wonder how they compare to their friends or their cousins in other states. And I don't have a way to compare that. I don't really know, oh, okay, so-and-so, middle child or oldest child got a 90th percentile on the Georgia State test exam. What does that mean? So I go to the national set of tests and I realize, Georgia's in the bottom 5. And then I go to the international PISA test to see how as a country we compare to other countries, and we're in the bottom half, math and reading, science as well, and trending down. So whatever level of satisfaction or comfort I may have had sending my kids to what I thought was a good local school and thought they were performing, I now have a vulnerability, I guess, in my confidence. And so do I not think that my kids will one day compete with kids in other states for jobs? Do I not think that they might compete with other countries for jobs and for work? So making sure that the bar isn't necessarily, it's not that I want a uniform bar, but I want a bar, a minimum threshold that's high enough that allows me to compare how my personal kids are doing compared to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. But I also want that for all of our kids in all of my schools, because otherwise I don't really have a good yardstick to know how do the kids that we're serving in Detroit compare to the kids that we're serving in Newark. And we need some sort of way to align that to get to have some sort of yardstick.
So I've had a chance to see it on 2 different fronts. It's almost a tale of 2 states. So when I was chosen by Governor Bob McDonnell to be Secretary of Education in Virginia, I took a look at our standards, had some familiarity with Virginia because I'd lived there for 7 years. I made the recommendation that Virginia not adopt Common Core standards. It wasn't because I was against Common Core standards, it's because I was for Virginia standards. Our standards had preceded No Child Left Behind. We had invested a lot of time in the math and what English language arts I would call it. And so was everything perfect? Absolutely not, but we had invested time. We were able to get the political buy-in from the lawmakers and parents. So for us, you know, we were one of 4 states initially to say, no, we're not going to go that route. And we didn't allow the money alone to be the carrot. We saw the long distance. And so right now, as a state, Virginia isn't dealing with some of the challenges that some of my sister states in different places. When I moved to Florida, Common Core makes sense for Florida. I believed it then, and I believed it now, and I still believe it right now. It's because there was a major shift in Florida going back to when at that time Governor Bush was in place, and particularly now with Governor Scott there trying to make sure we have accountability in place. We said we need to understand how kids in Miami, kids in Tallahassee or Jacksonville really are competing against kids in Georgia and different places. Florida is an international city or state. Our largest trade partner is Brazil. If you want to see a country over the last decade that's made tremendous change in education reform, look at Brazil. But we also have a number of students who are going to school out of state. And guess what? Look at what higher education is saying. They're saying, Gerard, you're graduating great students. They passed all the appropriate tests. They have great grades. But somehow they're coming to us and they're in need of remediation. In Florida, we spend $185 million a year on remediation for kids who we say we're prepared to go in. The business community said, guess what? I'm opening a plant in Kentucky and I have one in Florida. And I need to make sure that both of those kids are learning the same thing. So there's a practical aspect of it. But for me, I said we need to make sure, look at your state and see if it makes sense for you. Because really while we're debating the concept of Common Core, I'm really focused on a common chord. One that's going to link us to what we know works in terms of best practices, one that keeps us here, but a core that's going to link us to the future to be more prosperous.
We heard from Rick Ogston a couple of years ago at this forum. His Carpe Diem schools are spreading around the nation. Other blended learning models like Rocket Ship are, and obviously Matchbook is doing that as well. But as I mentioned, Matchbook's not here in Georgia. Carpe Diem's not here in Georgia. Rocket Ship's not here in Georgia. There are a lot of good charter operators that are not here in Georgia, despite the efforts that the state has made so far to make this a good place for charter schools to operate. So I want to ask you, Sajan, just point blank, why are you and those other charter operators not coming to Georgia?
This is the question I get the most of when I speak here in Atlanta. So at the risk of offending every single person in the room, I'll just be totally blunt. There's no vision here for education. There isn't, statewide. And if you ask my counterparts, the founders and CEOs of other blended and entrepreneurial education systems, Georgia, Atlanta, and Georgia in general is not even on their radar. Not even close to their radar. I was in Washington, D.C. earlier this week. They were enticing us to come do a charter school there. I had a phone call 2 days ago with Louisiana. I think there's no vision because there's at least 3 ingredients here that have to be in place for entrepreneurial blended models to come. You need a system or a way to rank your schools. Florida has its letter grade system A through F. DC, they have a number system 0 through 100. If you get 40 or below, you're on a watch list, and if that happens 3 years in a row, they can intervene and take over the school from local governance. Florida's got similar, Detroit's got same thing, Newark the same thing. And then what happens is once those schools are eligible to be taken over or converted to a charter, there's the second thing you need a pathway to scale. So I can have 25 different conversations with people about here's this one school we have right here in this county that we're interested in. And the thing is, it's a huge effort to take over a school. It's a massive undertaking to implement this and to do it well. And so if you're going to do it, you're going to invest a level of time and energy and philanthropic support and capital. What happens when you're successful? Because all of these guys, we plan for success. We don't plan to fail. Mm-hmm. What's the pathway from going from 1 school to 2 schools, 2 schools? We have to deliver the results, but assuming based on our track record as we do, what is that pathway? Nobody can articulate that here. And then third is there needs to be some sort of harbor master, someone that sort of between the state or the county and the education entrepreneurial sector that brings together those elements, that sort of runway, if you will, to land, that provides philanthropic support. So Louisiana has a parent trigger law. If your kids are in a school that's a failing school, as evidenced by their letter grade or DNF, the parents can literally petition and trigger the school to be removed from local governance, go into the recovery school district, and the recovery school district can assign that school to a charter of their selection, not of the recovery districts, but of the parent selection. That's one of the things Louisiana is talking to us about. But the people we're talking to, whether it's New Schools New Orleans or New Schools Baton Rouge, there's a harbor master that brings those elements. Because if I have to rely on whoever the fill-in-the-blank state superintendent, district superintendent, governor, I mean, there's an election cycle. So we don't know if the person that's making these promises sometime in less than 4 years is still going to be there. But we plan to be here long-term. So you need sort of a third-party intermediary, if you will, a nonprofit, a film. And these other cities and states, they have that. They are actively canvassing and attracting and marketing. When I went to Tennessee last year and spoke with the Achievement School District Superintendent Chris Barbick, the governor was there. And he just said, I want you here. There was a small group of us. They invited 6 different, may have been 8 different operators from around the country that said, we really think your model has high potential. And the governor laid out, this is the legislative things I've passed to get you here. Here's the funding to get you here. Here's the facilities. Here's a 10-year contract. He just laid it out and he said, what else I want to hear from you guys. What else do you need? Because I'll go into legislative session and I'll get that. Because we're going to make Tennessee get it out of the bottom 5 and we're going to get it in the top 5. And this is what I'm going to do. And they had brought together a group of philanthropic funders who said, if you guys come, we will fund all of your planning efforts to get you here. We'll help put boots on the ground. So that harbor master role is incredibly important. And when I go to other states and other cities, they have that. They're bringing that together. I have individual conversations with individual people from individual counties here. But there's no mechanism to bring that together. And there's no vision to make this. There just isn't. And now that I've offended everybody in the room, I'll pass it to Gerard.
Well, let's before we do that, let's try to maybe put a light at the end of the tunnel, if we will. You mentioned Recovery School District. That's an idea that has been mentioned here in the state very recently as a possibility. How far would that idea go toward providing what you're talking about? What else might be needed alongside it? And what would you say is up to the local districts to what part do they need to play in tandem with something like that to accomplish what you're talking about?
It'd be a huge step. I mean, this is what put Louisiana on the map after Katrina. And you know, we kind of had our Katrina moment with the Atlanta cheating scandal, except we just didn't leverage it. I think there was a strong base of public support to say, you know what, status quo isn't enough. You know what, yes, we should criminally prosecute people that broke the law. But criminally prosecuting them and getting them off the payroll and removing them from classrooms is one thing, and necessary. It's not sufficient. We're, 2.5, 3 years from the scandal? Does anybody feel like now we have a high-performing system in place? So I think one of the things that has to happen is, in creating this statewide recovery district, you have to have some sort of interlocal agreement that the districts agree for these schools that they've been failing year after year after year after year on any measure you measure, that these schools can go into this recovery district and and we shouldn't create a state bureaucracy to run those. We should create a state office to select winners and losers, a portfolio office essentially that runs an RFP that vets providers like ourselves to say, do you have the track record? Do you have the experience? Do you have the results to do this? And then once they grant us a school, they hold us accountable. And if we don't perform, we lose the right to run that school. And if we do perform, we earn the right to do more because the supply of failing schools, candidly, way outstrips the number of people that can actually do the work. But I think it would be a huge step in terms of putting Georgia on the map. That's what Tennessee did. That's what Michigan did. They're following Louisiana's example, and there's no reason we couldn't either.
Georgia, do you have anything you wanted to add about that?
The only point I would add is the importance of having a State Department of Education with competent people who can actually identify good players from bad actors. Because the worst thing that could happen is for you to open up the floodgate, allow a lot of people to come in who may be well-meaning, but who lack the technical skill to actually get it done. And so while we don't have that kind of model in Virginia, what we did as a department is we identified 4 groups, and I won't name them. We identified 4 groups. We had over 30 who applied, and we allowed school districts to pick amongst the 4. We vetted them. We think they're good. You can pick amongst the 4. Now, you have the right to go outside of that, and there's some funds that won't follow, but most of the people actually picked the 4 that we had. I think it was a rigorous system. So that would be one recommendation I would make to you as lawmakers and as administrators.